The vet stood there, waiting quietly in her scrubs, but Mark didn't move. Something about that moment didn't feel right, not anymore. I think, he began slowly, his voice rough. I think we need a minute. The vet nodded gently. Take your time, I'll let the team know. As she walked away, Mark leaned back in the chair, feeling like the air had thickened around him. He looked down at Rex again. His head was still lifted slightly, his cloudy eyes watching the door where the girl had disappeared. There was life in him, even if only a flicker. Mark had seen that look before, back when they worked together. Back when Rex had saved his life, by detecting a tripwire just seconds before a SWAT breach. Back when Rex had cornered a drug runner hiding under a crawlspace for hours. That sparked the alertness, the purpose was there again. Mark blinked. Are you trying to tell me something? Rex gave the faintest of huffs. He sat there for several more minutes, letting his mind wander through the past 8 years. Training days, patrol nights, tense busts, community demos where children had lined up to pet Rex like he was a superhero. And now, here they were, in this quiet waiting room, between the past and an ending he wasn't sure he could carry through. Anymore. Emily, that name. Her words wouldn't leave his mind. He's not done. He still has something to show you. Mark gently lifted Rex again and carried him outside. The sun had finally broken through, spilling golden light over the pavement. He set Rex down in the grass beside the lot, under the shade of a small tree. The dog inhaled deeply, nose twitching at the smell of morning dew, and car exhaust. Mark sat beside him, resting his hand on the dog's shoulder. One more day, he murmured. Let's wait one more day. He didn't know why. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe, just maybe, it was hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He texted the vet's office and said they were going home. He'd call again if anything changed. Back in the SUV, Rex rested his head on the back seat, but his breathing no longer sounded labored. Still weak, yes, but something about him seemed calmer. When they got home, Mark helped Rex out of the vehicle and into the small bungalow they shared. Their house was filled with photos from patrol days, commendations from the department, and one large framed newspaper article with the headline, K9 Hero, nabs suspected kidnapper in abandoned barn. Mark made some coffee, turned off his phone, and sat down with a worn file folder he hadn't touched in years. That it was the only case he and Rex never solved. A missing girl named Leila Grayson, 4 years old, vanished from a park just outside the county limits. They'd searched for weeks. Rex had been obsessed with the woods near the Grayson property, but nothing had come of it. Eventually, the trail went cold. The file was closed, but something nagged at Mark now. That girl Emily, she had said Rex still had something to show him. Why did those words feel like a puzzle piece suddenly fitting into place? He flipped open the folder and stared at the map of the last known search area. Rex, he whispered, looking over it. Do you remember? Rex, curled up on a dog bed nearby, opened his eyes. Mark leaned forward, heart pounding just a little harder now. Tomorrow, he said, we're going for one last ride. The sun had barely risen when Mark's phone buzzed, a message from Emily's mother. Are you sure about tomorrow? She's so excited. We've never done anything like this before. Mark smiled, despite the knot in his stomach. He typed back, we'll take it slow. Rex needs it, and so do I. When Emily and her mother arrived at Mark's house mid-morning, the little girl bounded toward Rex without hesitation. Her curls bounced as she knelt beside the aging dog, her eyes bright but gentle. Double quotes high. Rex, she said softly, brushing her fingers through his fur. I brought you a new blanket. Mark watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, sipping his coffee. He felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. How could a 6-year-old girl bring such warmth into a room shadowed by grief? Emily looked up at Mark and smiled. He's stronger than he looks, isn't he? Mark nodded slowly. Yeah, he's a fighter. The plan was simple, a short drive to the edge of the forest where Leila Grayson had disappeared. The same woods that had haunted Mark for years. Mark packed supplies, a flashlight, some water. Alicia helped Rex into the SUV. Emily climbed into the front passenger seat, clutching a small stuffed animal. The drive was quiet, save for the occasional crackle from the radio and the soft panting of Rex. Emily kept one hand on his head, whispering stories about imaginary adventures she and Rex would have together. When they arrived, the forest loomed tall and dense. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air. Mark opened the door and helped Rex out carefully. The dog wobbled but stood, tail wagging faintly. Emily beamed. Ready, Rex? She asked. Rex gave a weak bark in response. Mark led them down a narrow trail, fallen leaves crunching underfoot. Emily walked close beside Rex, sometimes stopping to kneel and whisper to him. Mark couldn't help but notice how the dog's eyes seemed more alert than they had in days. As they ventured deeper, Mark's memories surfaced, the countless searches, the dead ends, the frustration of the unsolved case. But Emily's calm presence brought a strange peace. Suddenly, Rex stopped. His ears perked up, and he moved toward a large hollow tree, sniffing intently. Emily crept forward and gently touched the tree's bark. Look, she whispered. Mark approached and saw something caught between the roots, a rusty metal bracelet. It looked old, worn by time and weather. Mark's heart pounded. It was the same style Leela had, worn a gift from her mother. Emily looked up at Mark, her eyes wide. He told me to find this. Mark swallowed hard. You heard him? Emily nodded confidently. He said he needs to keep looking. Without hesitation, Mark pulled out his phone and snapped pictures of the bracelet and the spot. He called the police department to report the discovery. Back at the station, the news spread fast. The cold case file reopened with a sudden surge of hope. Forensics teams were dispatched to the forest, combing the area with renewed urgency. But, meanwhile, Emily and Mark sat beside Rex, who was now resting under a blanket in the back of the SUV. The dog's breathing was steady, but his eyes shone with quiet determination. You did good, boy, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. You showed us the way. Emily smiled and whispered, he's not done yet. As the day faded into evening, Mark realized that this unlikely trio, a dying police dog, a weary officer, and a fearless little girl, had become something more. They were a team, bound not just by duty, but by hope. The search had just begun, but already, something was changing. The silence that had settled over the case was breaking. And for Rex, there was still one last mission to complete. The reopened investigation quickly pulled in resources from neighboring counties. Mark found himself caught in the whirlwind of phone calls, briefings, and new evidence arriving from the forest search team. Yet through it all, his mind kept drifting. Back to Emily and, more importantly, to Rex. The little girl's uncanny connection with the dog didn't make sense to Mark. How could a child, so young and inexperienced, sense what a battle-worn canine had been trying to communicate for years? That night, after the officers left the station and the search crews packed up for the day, Mark stayed late with the files spread across his desk. The evidence from the forest was compelling. The bracelet confirmed to belong to Lila Grayson. The torn fabric matched the description of her favorite jacket. And forensic specialists whispered cautiously about the possibility of locating more remains. Yet there was something else, a feeling Mark couldn't shake. He found himself reading through the detailed search reports from years before, studying Rex's behavior during those frustrating missions. Every time they approached the hollow tree, Rex had become restless, barking and scratching at the ground. The dog had been trying to tell them something, but no one had listened closely enough. Mark leaned back and closed his eyes. Memories flooded. Rex tail wagging, alert at his side during tense moments. Rex barking fiercely at the sound of distant footsteps. Rex nudging his arm when a hidden clue was near. He opened his eyes and thought of Emily. She said Rex still had something left to do. He wondered if that was true. The next morning, Mark found a message on his phone from Emily's mother. Emily says she wants to come to the station today. Mark wasn't sure how to respond. Bringing a child into the hectic, grim environment of a police station was risky. But then he thought about how Emily had brought a light back into Rex's fading eyes. Maybe she needed to be part of this too. He replied, bring her by. We could use her help. When Emily arrived, she was as cheerful as ever, clutching a small notebook filled with crayon drawings, maps, notes, and pictures of Rex in the forest. She handed it to Mark, who flipped through the pages in amazement. Where did you get this? He asked. Emily smiled shyly. I drew it last night. I had a dream about Rex showing me where to look. Mark was speechless. The innocence of a child, combined with a strange wisdom beyond her years, unsettled him in the best way possible. As the day wore on, Emily accompanied Mark and a small team back to the forest, this time walking alongside Rex. The dog's strength was fading, but his focus was sharp. At one point, Emily whispered to Rex, tell us where. Rex paused, lifted his nose, and moved slowly toward a shallow ditch beneath a cluster of dense bushes. Mark knelt down, brushing leaves aside, and found a small, broken wooden box buried beneath the dirt. Inside, there were a few more personal items: a locket, a tiny doll missing an arm, and what looked like a faded photograph of a smiling little girl. Emily's voice was barely audible as she said, it's her. Mark's heart clenched. The search was no longer about cold files or statistics. It was about bringing peace to a family torn apart for years, about honoring Rex's years of service and his final message. That evening, as they returned to town, Mark looked over at Rex, who rested in the back seat, eyes half closed but alert enough to respond to Emily's soft voice. Mark whispered, you did it, old friend. You never gave up. Emily nodded. He didn't want to leave until he helped. Mark felt a surge of gratitude, not only for Rex, but for this little girl who had stumbled into their lives and shaken the dust off a forgotten story, for the first time in years. Mark allowed himself to hope. The sun was warm and golden as Mark, Emily, and Rex made their way back toward the forest's edge. It was late morning, and a light breeze rustled the leaves overhead. The air carried the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else, something old, like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Emily's small hand rested gently on Rex's neck, and though the dog's movements were slow and labored, his spirit remained unbroken. Mark had never seen such determination in an animal that was so clearly nearing the end. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on his chest. Knowing this might be Rex's final journey, they followed a narrow trail into the thick woods, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches. Mark carried a flashlight, not because it was dark, but because the beams helped cut through the dense shadows that clung to the underbrush. Rex's nose twitched rapidly as he moved forward. Emily whispered softly, "You're almost there, Rex. Just a little further." Suddenly, Rex stopped near a hollow tree. His ears perked, and he let out a weak but insistent bark. Mark hurried forward and knelt down, shining his flashlight into the tree's hollow. The beam caught on something metallic. He reached in carefully and pulled out a rusted locket, its clasp slightly broken but still intact. He opened it with trembling fingers and found a tiny photograph inside a young girl. Smiling brightly, Mark's breath caught. It was Lila Grayson. Emily's eyes widened. He found her, she whispered. Mark's phone buzzed with messages from the police department. The forensic team was ready to move in, and search dogs were being deployed to scour the surrounding area, but for Mark, this was more than just another piece of evidence. It was a moment of closure for Lila, for her family, and for Rex. As they waited, Mark looked down at Rex, whose breathing was shallow but steady. "You've done more than we ever thought possible, boy," Mark said softly, stroking the dog's head. Emily leaned over and hugged Rex gently. "Thank you for helping." Minutes later, the first team arrived, led by a detective who greeted Mark and Emily warmly. "We're going to start digging here," the detective said. "Anything you find, call us immediately." Mark nodded. "Rex deserves this." Emily stood beside Rex, her hands still on his neck. "He's a hero." The team worked carefully throughout the afternoon, uncovering more personal items, a torn piece of jacket, a small toy, and, finally, human remains buried beneath the leaves. The discovery confirmed what everyone had hoped for, but feared at the same time. Mark felt tears prick at his eyes. He thought about the pain Lila's family had endured, the unanswered questions, the sleepless nights. But now, because of Rex and a little girl who refused to give up, the truth was coming to light. As dusk settled, Emily and Mark sat quietly near the edge of the forest. Rex lay between them, exhausted but peaceful. Mark looked at Emily and smiled. "You know, I think you gave him strength today." Emily smiled back. "I think he gave me hope." The bond between the three of them had grown into something powerful, something that transcended words. For Rex, this was not the end. It was his last patrol, a final mission completed with courage and love. And for Mark and Emily, it was the beginning of healing. News of the discovery spread quickly through Pinebrook and beyond. The small town that had once forgotten Lila Grayson was now gripped by a mixture of grief and hope. The cold case file, dormant for 4 long years, was officially reopened. Investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened, and Mark found himself caught in the middle of it, all proud of Rex. But painfully aware of the toll it had taken, the forensic teams returned to the forest daily, uncovering more evidence that slowly painted a picture of what had happened to Lila. The discovery of her belongings and remains finally gave her family the answers they'd been searching for, though the ache of loss remained raw and deep. In the midst of the renewed investigation, Rex's health began to decline rapidly. The cancer was relentless. Mark noticed how the once bright and alert dog now struggled even to stand, his breath shallow and labored. Despite this, Rex's spirit never wavered, especially when Emily was near. Emily came to visit Rex every evening. She would sit beside him, softly reading stories or talking about her day. Rex seemed comforted by her presence, often resting his head on her lap as if drawing strength from the little girl who had changed everything. One evening, Emily looked up at Mark, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "I want to help," she said simply. "I want to make sure Rex's story is never forgotten." Mark smiled, touched by her bravery. "You already have, Emily. You and Rex have given this town something to hold on to." The community rallied around Rex and Emily. Local news stations ran stories about the dog and the girl who had reopened the case. Donations poured in to help with Rex's medical bills and to support the family of Lila Grayson. But amidst the attention, Emily remained humble. She wasn't interested in the spotlight, she cared only for Rex and the truth they had uncovered together. Mark arranged for Rex to have a comfortable space at home, surrounded by familiar scents and quiet love. He stayed by his side day and night, refusing to leave the dog alone in his final days. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Rex let out a soft whimper. Mark looked over to see the dog's eyes fix on Emily, who was gently stroking his fur. "You did it, Rex," Emily whispered. "You helped find her." Rex's tail gave a weak wag, then his breathing slowed. Mark felt a lump in his throat but swallowed hard. He knew the time was near. That night, surrounded by those who loved him, Rex passed away peacefully. His body relaxed, his pain finally eased. Emily placed a small flower on Rex's chest and whispered, "You can rest now, boy." The town mourned the loss of a hero, Plans began for a police funeral to honor Rex's service and the remarkable role he had played in bringing closure to a grieving family. Emily, though young, stood strong during the memorial. She carried a photo of Rex close to her heart and spoke softly about the bond they shared. Mark watched with pride and sadness, knowing that Rex's legacy would live on far beyond his years. The morning after Rex passed away, the town of Pine awoke to news that rippled through every corner. Their beloved canine hero was gone. But with the sorrow came a swell of gratitude and respect for the dog who had served not just the police department, but an entire community. Officer Mark Leland found himself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Flowers arrived at the station. Letters came from citizens who remembered Rex's bravery. Even children from the local schools sent handmade cards, each adorned with drawings of a German shepherd wearing a police vest. Plans for Rex's funeral were set quickly. The police department wanted to honor him with full ceremony of final tribute befitting a hero. Invitations went out to officers, former handlers, and community leaders alike. On the day of the funeral, the sky was overcast, the air heavy with quiet respect. Mark stood beside the casket, draped in the American flag, now adorned with a blue canine service ribbon. Emily, dressed in her best outfit, held tightly to a framed photo of Rex, her eyes glistening but brave. The ceremony began with a heartfelt speech from the police chief, who spoke of Rex's loyalty, courage, and the countless lives he had touched. Then came moments of silence, punctuated only by the soft sound of wind through the trees. As the procession moved to the burial site near the police academy's training grounds, Emily walked ahead, placing a single daisy on Rex's casket. Mark found himself kneeling beside the freshly turned earth, his fingers trembling as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, weathered collar, the one Rex had worn during their first patrol together. "Thank you," Mark whispered, his voice breaking, "for everything." That evening, Mark returned home to an unexpected visitor, Emily. She came carrying a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. "I wanted to give this to you," she said, handing it over. Mark carefully untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside was a collection of drawings and notes, each one telling a part of Rex's story from Emily's perspective, a story of hope, friendship, and the magic of listening. "I want people to remember him," Emily said softly, "not just as a dog, but as a hero who never gave up." Mark smiled, his heart full. "You've given him a voice, Emily." Inspired by the bond between Emily and Rex, Mark decided to create a new program at the police department. It would pair retired Canine South with children facing difficult challenges, offering therapy, companionship, and healing. Emily was the first to volunteer, helping train the dogs and spending time with the kids who needed them most. Though Rex was gone, his spirit lived on in the lives he had saved and the hearts he had touched. One afternoon, as Mark watched Emily laugh while playing with a young shepherd named Max, he realized something profound. Rex's final gift wasn't just the truth, he uncovered it was the unbreakable bond that had changed them all forever. The park dedication ceremony was unlike anything Pinebrook had seen in years. On a bright Saturday morning, families gathered under the shade of towering oak trees, children's laughter blending with the gentle hum of a nearby fountain. The new Rex Memorial Park stood proudly at the center of town, a peaceful green space, dedicated to the brave police dog who had become a symbol of hope and courage. Mark stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as Emily led a small group of kids, holding colorful balloons. She wore a delicate silver necklace, a locket shaped like the one found in the forest, a subtle reminder of the journey they had shared. The mayor stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat. "Today, we honor Rex, a loyal protector, a friend, and a hero. His story is one of service, sacrifice, and the unspoken bond between man and dog." A bronze statue stood near the entrance, capturing Rex in mid-leap, alert and ready. The artist had perfectly captured the determined gaze that had inspired so many. Children reached out to touch the statue's smooth surface, their faces lit with admiration. Emily was invited to speak. She stepped forward with a quiet confidence beyond her years. "Rex wasn't just a dog," she said softly. "He listened when no one else did. He helped us find the truth, and he showed us how to keep hope alive." Her words brought a wave of emotion over the crowd. Mark's eyes watered as he looked at her, the girl who had changed everything. The ceremony concluded with the release of white doves, soaring high into the sky. Families picnicked on the grass, sharing stories and laughter. The park quickly became a gathering place where memories of Rex were cherished and new friendships blossomed. At the police department, Mark was busy launching the Canine Therapy Program. Inspired by Rex's legacy, the program paired retired service dogs with children who had experienced trauma, providing comfort and companionship. Emily was a natural, working alongside Mark to train the dogs and help the children feel safe. The program grew quickly, drawing attention from neighboring towns eager to adopt similar initiatives. One afternoon, as Mark watched Emily gently guide a shy boy through his first meeting with a gentle Labrador, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Rex's story didn't end with him, Mark thought. It's only just beginning. The bond forged between Emily, Mark, and the dogs had created ripples far beyond their small town, a reminder that even in loss, there is hope. Even in silence, there is a voice waiting to be heard. And for Pinebrook, the name Rex would forever echo as a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the power of listening. Months had passed since the dedication of Rex Memorial Park, yet the story of the brave police dog and the little girl who saved him continued to inspire everyone in Pine. Life, once weighed down by grief and uncertainty, had begun to bloom anew. Emily was no longer just the curious child who walked into a vet clinic one quiet morning. She had grown into a young girl with a sense of purpose, her bond with Rex's memory guiding her every step. At school, she shared stories of courage and kindness, encouraging classmates to listen closely, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Mark, too, found a new rhythm. The pain of losing Rex was still fresh, but the canine therapy program he'd started had become a beacon of hope for many families. Watching retired service dogs bring comfort to children who needed it most reminded him daily of the power one dog could have on so many lives. One afternoon, as the sun cast a warm glow over Rex Memorial Park, Mark arrived with a new companion, a young German Shepherd named Max, recently retired from active duty. Emily's eyes lit up as she knelt beside Max, her fingers brushing his soft fur. Ready for your new adventure? Mark asked. Max wagged his tail eagerly, sensing the excitement in the air. Emily smiled. Rex would be proud. Together, they walked through the park, the statue of Rex standing tall beside the playground, watching over the community he had protected. As they passed families enjoying picnics and children playing games, Emily paused and looked up at the sky. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, and for a moment, it felt as if Rex's spirit was right there with them, quiet, steady, and full of love. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Rex, for everything." Mark reached out and took her hand. "He told me you'd listen," he said with a smile. Emily grinned back. Sometimes, all it takes is someone willing to hear. The bond between a dying police dog, a grieving officer, and a brave little girl had changed more than just a cold case. It had healed wounds, united a town, and created a legacy that would live on forever. And in the heart of Pinebrook, Rex's story remained a testament to loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable connection between humans and their four-legged heroes.